Greetings, everyone. I'd like to introduce some of the basics of first none verbs. So some of the most common first none verbs would include things like nafal, to fall, nasa, to lift up, or naga, to touch or to reach. And as you will quickly see, they are called first none verbs because they have a nun in the first position. Of the three letters, the first one is a nun. So why do we learn these as a weak verb? Well, if you look at the call suffix, that is the perfect, the past tense, you'll remember that with suffix forms, we only add a sufformative to the back end of the verb. And in this case, we're not going to change anything at all. So if we wanted to say nafal in the past tense, we'd say nafalti. And you can see it's just like katalti. And if we wanted to say he fell, nafal, just like katal. So in the case of the suffix, there's no changes at all. This is not a weak verb. But when we come to the prefix, where we're adding something to the front of the verb, now the fact that the first of the three radicals is a nun is going to make a difference. So let's look at this most commonly used form, namely the third person masculine singular, the he will kill form. If we blow this up so we can get a good look, we will recall that the standard pattern is the yud on the front, a chirek, and then an o vowel as the theme vowel, that is between the second and third radical. So yiktol. And if we try to just take our three-letter root, nafal, and plug it in following this pattern, we get yin pol. That's what we're going to want to manipulate just a little bit to see how this forms. So if this were a strong verb, it would be yin pol. But what a first nun verb will do is that nun is going to assimilate to the second root letter, which means that the prefix form will not be yin pol, but will be yip pol. And if you want to know where did our nun go, it shows up as a dagesh. And although there was already a dagesh lene in the pei, making it a hard p, p, instead of f, now we have a dagesh forte because the nun is resulted in the doubling of the next letter. So really, for purposes of pronunciation, this is yip pol, because that doubling dagesh has resulted in two versions of the p. If we look at some other examples, let's just look at a few other prefix forms. Starting with the top, what would have been en pol, I will fall, becomes just ep pol, I will fall. Tin pol becomes tip pol, you will fall. Tin pli becomes tip pli, you will fall, said to a woman. And as we just saw, yin pol becomes yip pol. Now, since we have the prefix forms right before us, this is a good time to ask about how do we make the imperative. So here we're looking at the forms for you will fall, and we've kept the kind of theoretical original form on the left. You'll see why in a moment. What's the usual rule for how to make an imperative? You take the prefix form and you simply, if you want to say fall, you simply get rid of the performative. So instead of tip pol, just pol. Instead of tip pli, just pli. That's a good instinct. And as we will see at the end of this video, you do precisely that for one type of first none verb. But there is a type of first none verb like nafal, where it's not what you do. And in fact, when you want to make the imperative, you go back to this uncontracted hypothetical form of the prefix, tin pol, tin pli. And now, with the nun still there, you again just get rid of the performative. So the way to say fall in a hole, buddy, is to just say nipol. And for the female form, we would say nifli. So you're still just getting rid of the performative, But in the case of this imperative, the nun reappears. In a similar way, I've circled here the second masculine singular form, because as you will recall from strong verbs, it's very similar to this form that we use to make the infinitive. So for instance, katol would mean to kill, and katol is the infinitive. So the infinitive of nun pe lamed is napol. And more often than not, we see infinitives with the l, and this is perfectly regular. Lin pol. He is about lin pol. He's about to fall. That's all there is to say about the first type of first nun verbs. But you saw at the beginning, we put up a couple different first nun verbs, and the third of these, indeed the second and the third, naga, to touch or to reach, will illustrate the second type. And the difference between these two types is quite slight. It really just pertains to how you make the imperative and the infinitive. So from naga, I've put up the second person forms of the imperfect, the prefix forms. Tigga, you will touch. And you can see there's our performative. The nun has assimilated into the gimel, leaving that dagesh forte, and so on. Tig-e, you feminine will touch. Tig-u, y'all will touch. If we want to change those to the imperative, touch, now we do just get rid of the performative. And the nun doesn't reappear. In other words, the difference between type 1 and type 2 is when you make the imperative, does the original nun reappear? And in keeping with that basic difference, when we make the infinitive, it's going to be built off of this form. And so if this is touch, ga, then to touch is ga-at. And that's something new. We're now going to add a tav. This is going to look just like a segulate noun with the accent on the first syllable. And ga'at means to touch. And again, if we wanted to add our word for two, in this case, it won't be lig-ga'at. It will actually be la-ga'at. And this peculiar pointing with the comets will be true for all the other types of first nun verbs that form their infinitives in this way.